So, let's talk about the Ukraine scandal. No, not the Trump Ukraine scandal that turned out to be a massive nothing burger where there's no quid pro quo. Let's talk about the Hunter Biden Ukraine scandal, the Ukraine scandal they don't want to talk about because it is absolutely damning for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is now a criminal suspect in Ukraine because of a bribe case involving his son Hunter Biden. Now, if you just view mainstream media and you're new to InfoWars or Dr. Silence content, let me explain what went down to you. So, back when Biden was a VP, his son, Hunter Biden, a unqualified meth head, was on the board of the biggest and most powerful natural gas company in Ukraine. Now, there was a special prosecutor, the Prosecutor General, Viktor Shokin, who was investigating Hunter Biden and all the other members of the board. Joe Biden threatened openly on tape, to withhold $1 billion in federal aid unless the Prosecutor General was fired. Don't take my word for it. Here's Joe Biden saying it himself.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
I bet you hadn't heard about that. Unless you're an InfoWars follower or a Breitbart follower or someone who follows real new media, because it doesn't fit their narrative. Now, you remember the 3-year-long hoax that still continues to live on as kind of a ghost in dying leftist Twitter circles about the Russian collusion hoax and the Ukraine scandal with President Trump that turned out to be nothing. There was no quid pro quo. I'm sure you remember that because it was literally everywhere. Every single person on mainstream media said that Trump was a Russian agent.
I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. Case closed. We have all been right all this time. The Trump gang is guilty. An intelligent 10-year-old could tell you the essence of the conspiracy case against Donald Trump, his presidential campaign, his presidential administration, and the government of Russia has, for all intents and purposes, been proven. It is case closed. Impeach, convict, and arrest Donald John Trump today!
The Russians offered help, the campaign accepted help, the Russians gave help, and the president made full use of that help. And that is pretty damning.
Overall, yes, we still have to describe this as a sheaf of uncorroborated allegations. But little pieces supporting that bottom line thesis really do keep falling in line. Right? I mean, think about what we've learned just in the last few weeks. Michael Flynn resigning, right? Buried in the revelations about National Security Advisor Michael Flynn resigning, right? Him having contact with the Russian government that he did not own up to and lying about what the content was of his communications. Buried in those revelations was not just the fact that he talked to the Russian government during the transition, but he also had multiple contacts with the Russian government during the campaign.
But now, as I said, that narrative is finally starting to die. It still lives on Twitter, where leftists with blue wave Twitter handles rant about it. It still lives on in dying circles of the mainstream media, but the Russian collusion hoax is considered that, a hoax, based off a false dossier, illegal spying by the Obama administration on President Trump before he was President Trump. And it's pretty much a big nothing burger, and it's widely accepted as such, or I would hope. Now that Joe Biden is finally in the spotlight for the actual crimes that he committed on tape, admittedly, What is being said?
We also saw an effort this week by Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer, to get the Ukrainians to investigate Joe Biden for his diplomacy in Ukraine while his son was serving on the board of the largest natural gas producer there. And the president told Politico on Friday it would be appropriate for him to discuss a probe of Biden with the attorney general. Is it appropriate?
Of course it's not appropriate. And what is so shocking to me, I served for many years on a democracy commission in the Congress where we would partner with parliaments in emerging countries, emerging democracies, and we would always say, when you win an election, you don't seek to jail the losing side. And here the President of the United States is saying it's perfectly okay for him, and he has said this before, to go to the Attorney General and get them to open an investigation of his arrivals. And sadly, this Attorney General has turned out to be so political and so partisan and so without, frankly, without integrity, he just might do it. And, you know, that does add to the sense of crisis, that these democratic norms are being broken down every day. The fact that we're not even done with this investigation of the last foreign interference in our election, and Giuliani, apparently with the president's, at least initially, in knowledge and a blessing, was going to get the help of another foreign government in a presidential election. You know, it tells me that they not only think there's nothing wrong with this, if that's true, there's something wrong with them.
How about the underlying issue, though? There's no public evidence that the vice president, former vice president, took any inappropriate action to help his son. But was it right for Hunter Biden to take a job like that in Ukraine while his father was engaged in diplomacy there?
I don't know the circumstances in which he took the job, but I can say this vis-a-vis Joe Biden. There's no evidence, nor has there ever been any evidence, that he was doing anything but trying to get the Ukraine government to crack down on corruption. We're providing generous support to Ukraine. We're providing defensive weapons to Ukraine. We want Ukraine to be successful in its conflict with Russia. But part of that is having a government that the people of Ukraine are willing to fight for and protect. And they've had an endemic corruption problem. That's what Joe Biden was trying to address. So going after his son is just a method of going after someone the president believes is his most formidable opponent. So, yes, let the president go after him. But don't seek the help of a foreign government in your election. And, you know, if this isn't criminal, and Bob Mueller said he could not prove all the elements of a crime, then maybe we need to change the elements of that crime, because we cannot make this the new norm, that if you can't win an election on your own, it's fine to seek help from a foreign power.
Well, you heard it for yourself. They say it's a hoax. They say it's not real. They say the president shouldn't be looking into this, that it's insane, that it's wrong. I mean, these people are the biggest hypocrites on the face of the earth. They falsely and maliciously attacked Trump for years over what turned out to be a nothing burger. But when their candidate, when their golden boy Biden is on tape admitting that he used his power as the VP to get the prosecutor fired, that he used his power as VP to save his son, that he used his power for corrupt and malicious intent, they don't care. It's false. It didn't happen. The video must come from another dimension, right? No. It comes from right here. Joe Biden is a crook. Let's look more into the mountains and mountains of evidence surrounding this whole scenario, surrounding Obama's Spygate, surrounding the Biden scandal, surrounding it all. Let's look into some videos.
He is investigative reporter, executive vice president of the Hill, John Solomon. John, why don't we go through what you have? It's too much to digest. I mean, you got 450 new documents. Let's go through the few that we can. We'll put them on the screen for our viewers.
Okay. So let's start with something that's important about this. There is a media narrative that is false. How do we know it's false? Because the documents I possess show it is false. So let's start with one of my favorites. This was Katie Tur on Friday night, and many others across the weekend said there is no evidence that the Ukraine embassy was ever asked for help in Washington to help the Democratic National Committee. In fact, Katie Tur called it on NBC News. She called that Russian propaganda, that claim. Now, you showed the Politico article. I have a statement from the Ukrainian embassy in Washington on the record from their sitting ambassador in Washington that, in fact, Alexandra Chalupa, the DNC contractor, came to the Ukraine embassy in spring 2016 and asked for help in finding dirt on Donald Trump in hopes of staging a congressional hearing to hurt Donald Trump in the fall election of 2016. That is the Ukraine embassy's on-the-record statement. In addition, they state that Ms. Chalupa also asked for the Ukraine president to visit the United States and spend time with an investigative reporter trying to turn up dirt on Donald Trump and Paul Manafort. What did the embassy do? They say they recognized this request for what it was, an improper effort to influence the election, and they refused to cooperate with Ms. Chalupa. That is a very important confirmation of something that the rest of the media is calling a tinfoil hat conspiracy. It's on the record. It's in Politico. It's on the embassy's own words.
I mean, it's pretty devastating. We got about 90 more seconds, and you brought these other documents. I want people to understand it.
Sure. So let's go to Shokin's deposition. So Mr. Shokin was a general prosecutor.
Shokin is the prosecutor that got fired by Biden.
Biden, absolutely. And remember, Joe Biden's stories, it had nothing to do with Burisma, even though he knew that the prosecutor was looking at Burisma. Mr. Shokin says emphatically in his sworn deposition under the penalty of perjury, under oath, that in fact he was told he was fired because he refused to stand down in the Burisma investigation. That is the only reason he was fired. He was told that by Ukraine's president. That is a complete contradiction of what everything Joe Biden has said.
So
we
last
have to find
question,
out which
John.
of these two men are telling the truth.
When the mob says this is all, that none of this is proven, without any evidence, they're lying, aren't they?
They are. It pains me to say that because I believe in the good of journalism, but I can tell you
journalism's dead, John. I said that in 07.
I won't accept that. I'm going to keep committing journalism, and I think tomorrow night what we can do is go through some of the 8 or 10 biggest lies and show people the proof moment by moment, step by step.
All right, so tomorrow we're going to give you the 8 to 10 biggest lies about the DNC, Hillary's campaign, colluding with Ukraine and successfully impacting the election. Even Politico, even a blind squirrel gets the nut once in a while. Great investigative reporting, John Solomon.
I mean, come on. These are legal documents. There's videotape of Joe Biden saying this stuff. I mean, how much more do I have to prove to you to show what's going on here? It's very, very simple. It's very, very simple. The Obama administration illegally spied on Trump. Joe Biden used his powers to bribe the Ukrainian government. It's out in the open. Let's see what President Trump's lawyer has to say on this issue.
Quote from page 75 of her testimony, that, quote, there had been a directive for a whole-scale review of our foreign policy assistance, and the ties between our foreign policy objectives and that assistance. This had been going on actually for many months. So multiple witnesses testified that the president had long-standing concerns and specific concerns about Ukraine. The House managers understandably ignore the testimony that took place before their own committees. In her testimony of October 14th, 2019, Dr. Hill testified at pages 118 and 119 of her transcript that she thinks the president has actually quite publicly said that he was very skeptical about corruption in Ukraine. And then she said, again in her testimony, and in fact, he's not alone, because everyone has expressed great concerns about corruption in Ukraine. Similarly, Ambassador Yovanovitch testified that they all had concerns about corruption in Ukraine, and as noted on pages 142 of her deposition transcript, when asked what she knew about the president's deep-rooted skepticism about Ukraine's business environment, she answered that President Trump delivered an anti-corruption message to former Ukrainian President Poroshenko in their first meeting in the White House on June 20th, 2017. NSC Senior Director Morrison confirmed on November 19th, 2019 at page 63 in his testimony transcript that This was during the Volcker-Morrison public hearing, that he was aware that the president thought Ukraine had a corruption problem, his words again, and he continued, as did many others familiar with Ukraine.
Well, you've heard it from the horse's mouth. You've heard it from Biden. You've heard it from Trump's lawyers. You've heard it from the legal documents. You've even heard the false narrative that contrasts it from Adam Schiff and Rachel Maddow. You've seen it all. It's a very simple story to tell because Trump is telling the truth. Joe Biden is a demented, corrupt, criminal crook who used his power, abused his power, to help his son in Ukraine. The Obama administration illegally spied on President Trump and tried to destroy his campaign. The Russian collusion narrative is false. The Steele dossier, the thing that the entire investigation was based on, was fake. Fusion GPS, all of it, false. Like I said earlier, I don't know how much more I have to prove. And I feel like if this information was out in the open, we wouldn't really have anything to prove. It would just be free to see. Because everyone would realize just how evil these people truly are. Trump has problems, I'm sure. But not like this. Biden is on tape confessing to a crime, and they do nothing. This is America in 2020. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. As long as your last name is Biden, as long as you smoke meth, do cocaine, as long as your daddy is the VP and you can get away with whatever you want. Now listen, I'm not one to speak about nepotism, but this is getting out of control.